Over breakfast, Elias informed Julian of Vincent's axis alignments passing during the night. The news caught Julian off guard. He remarked that he had just sent for 2 specialists from Mayo Clinic to see him, wondering aloud at the sudden decline. A genuine sadness settled over him, his eyes glistening slightly as he admitted that while their friendship had begun as a matter of political convenience, he had grown to care for the man. He recalled their university days at Yale, how Vincent had looked out for him, a young man full of ambition and grand plans for a life of public service. He mentioned that Vincent's last request had been for Julian to look after his young son, and he now worried if the boy had anyone to care for him. Elias assured him there was no cause for concern. He had already arranged for the child to be brought to the White House residence, where a team of nannies and staff were attending to him. Julian felt a wave of relief, explaining that Vincent had been worried, having no trustworthy siblings to turn to. His brother-in-law, according to Vincent, was a man of questionable character, leaving him to fear the boy would be left alone. Elias suggested that Vincent's assessment of his wife's family might not have been entirely objective. He explained that Vincent's wife, a quiet debutante from a powerful Texas family, had been chosen by the old senator purely for the family's deep pockets and political influence. The marriage was rushed, a transaction disguised as a union, with the axis alignments leveraging the prestige of their name to secure a significant financial contribution from the Texan dynasty. The bride's family had believed they were marrying their daughter into a future of power and influence. But soon after the wedding, the senator's scandal broke, and the family's fortunes collapsed. The Texans were furious. The young wife later died in childbirth, creating an even deeper rift. Her family, likely seeking a clean break from the tarnished axis alignment name and a way to avoid any association with the scandal, had used the dowry as a pretext to demand a separation of assets and cut all ties. Legally, the trust should have passed to the son, but Vincent, a man of immense and often impractical pride, had simply returned everything in a fit of anger, severing the last link to his late wife's family in Austin. Julian finally understood the full picture. It wasn't about the money. It was about making a public statement of disassociation. Elias nodded, observing that Vincent surely knew this on some level but was too stubborn to admit it. Still, Elias conceded Vincent had shown good judgment in his final days by choosing to trust Julian. Everyone in Washington, he mused, knew of Julian's unwavering loyalty and good nature. Julian wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a jab, remarking dryly that Vincent probably just heard his investment funds offered stable returns. He explained that Vincent had wanted to place his son's inheritance in Julian's care, even donating half of it to charity. Elias simply nodded again, a faint smile on his lips, remarking on Julian's incurable habit of rescuing lost causes, a habit he would always have to clean up after. Elias then informed Julian he was granting him a 2-week leave to manage his family affairs and reconnect with old mentors and friends before his official duties at the State Department began. He added, however, that Julian was still expected at National Security Council meetings if anything urgent arose. He also mentioned that he had instructed Agent Peterson, the head of his Secret Service detail, to send him a daily report of Julian's schedule. He advised Julian not to give Peterson a hard time if the agent seemed overly inquisitive. A grin spread across Julian's face as he asked how Elias could be so certain he'd be difficult. He insisted he was always perfectly polite to his security detail. Elias's expression was knowing. He reminded Julian that he knew him better than anyone, knew of his deep-seated dislike for being managed or controlled. Even his own family had learned not to push him too hard. The remark sent Julian's mind back to his reckless, defiant youth, a time of self-sabotage and rebellion. It seemed a lifetime away, and looking back, especially after seeing Vincent's life cut short. He felt a disorienting sense of wonder at how he'd ended up here. He realized, with a sudden clarity, that everything had changed the day he met Elias. A subtle, affectionate impulse made him reach out and squeeze Elias's arm. Seeing the president, impeccably dressed and composed, he refrained from any further disruption and simply whispered with a smile that Elias was the only one he would ever allow to manage him. Elias's lips curved into a faint smile. He knew Julian was, for the most part, obedient to him, yet his security detail was well aware of the stubborn, fiercely independent streak that lay just beneath the surface. He patted Julian's hand and told him to head back to his family's estate and not to be late that evening. Julian confessed he had no desire to go home. The family dinner 2 nights prior had been an ordeal, with even his estranged older brother, Connor, now back in D.C., waiting for a new assignment from the Department of Justice. Elias casually offered to have Connor reassigned to a remote outpost if Julian found his presence bothersome. Julian declined, admitting that Connor seemed to have matured. He had married while stationed abroad and returned with a wife and child. Julian relayed his mother's assessment of her new daughter-in-law. A sensible and gracious woman from a respectable, educated family. His mother believed that away from the toxic influence of their grandmother, Connor had finally learned to judge character properly. His parents had set them up in a townhouse nearby, which was a relief. With his younger sisters both engaged, their father being utterly useless, Connor could now help their mother with the family obligations. Julian had no time for such things, and Connor's willingness to handle negotiations with the fiancés' families was a welcome development. Elias recalled that Julian also had a younger brother who had just been accepted to Georgetown. Julian confirmed this, adding that the boy now wanted to enroll in the new international policy program at Chaucer University, which Marcus Vance was establishing. He had told his brother to apply and see if he could pass the entrance exams. Elias remarked with a smile that Julian was sounding more and more like a responsible older brother. Julian sighed, reflecting on how fortunate their father was, having to worry about nothing while his children grew up and managed themselves. His father's latest obsession, after a phase of landscape architecture, was a sudden and fervent interest in spirituality. He had spent the last 2 weeks at a high-end spiritual retreat in the Virginia countryside, the Sanctuary of Infinite Compassion, consulting with its charismatic guru. He was now planning to fund the construction of a new Madion garden on the property to secure good karma for his next life. Elias chuckled, commenting that it sounded like a legitimate enterprise, and that the sanctuary's leader was shrewd to have found a donor as generous as Julian's father. Julian leaned in, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. He explained that this guru was a master manipulator. He had told his father that Julian was the reincarnation of a sacred koi fish from a celestial pond, which explained his golden aura. The guru claimed that Julian, having absorbed ancient wisdom in his past life, was destined for greatness in this one, a mission to serve humanity. He was not meant for worldly attachments like women or early marriage, as such things would dull his spiritual energy and diminish his fortune. His path, the guru insisted, must be allowed to unfold naturally. Elias struggled to maintain a straight face, acknowledging that it sounded rather convincing. Julian continued, barely suppressing his own laughter. The guru had even suggested to his father that someone with Julian's profound spiritual lineage should consider a monastic life, where he would surely achieve enlightenment. He had spun a tale where Julian was destined to be a great statesman in the secular world, but could become a revered spiritual leader if he renounced it. He'd flattered Julian's father, calling him a man of 3 lifetimes of good deeds, which was why the celestial spirit had chosen to be born as his son. His father, Julian exclaimed, had bought every word of it. Before this, he had been relentlessly trying to set Julian up on dates. Now, he was utterly convinced of Julian's sacred destiny and had devoted himself to acts of charity, funding soup kitchens and now this grand Madayon garden, all to secure his own spiritual legacy. Julian clapped his hands softly, declaring the tactic a resounding success. He revealed he had already contacted a well-known psychic, a flamboyant character named Master Stardust, to add another layer to the narrative. The plan was for the psychic, during a geodivination reading, to inform his father that it would be catastrophically unlucky for the entire family if Julian were to marry. Elias, now laughing openly, cautioned him not to take it too far. He pointed out that Julian was getting to an age where his continued bachelorhood would require a plausible public explanation. Julian waved it off, explaining that now, whenever someone tried to suggest a match, his father would earnestly recite the guru's prophecy. Most people, he said, assumed his father was just making an eccentric excuse to politely decline and didn't press the matter. Elias pushed back his chair, the meal finished. Julian, who had finished eating some time ago, rose to walk him to his car. Elias waved him off, telling him it wasn't necessary. As Elias was about to step into the armored limousine, Julian glanced at the Secret Service agents. He noted that he hadn't seen Zach, one of the senior agents, for a couple of days. Elias explained that he had sent Zach to Houston to handle the situation with Zane, instructing him to work with another operative, Kurjercheo Hijicho-Hudson, to liquidate some assets to fund the new university. With that, the car door closed, and the motorcade pulled away. Julian stood watching for a long moment before reluctantly turning to head for his family's estate. He found his father, Arthur Sterling, waiting for him, overjoyed to see his most successful son. Arthur immediately unrolled a set of architectural drawings for his Madayon garden, eagerly seeking Julian's input. He pointed out the plans for a 37-story pagoda, a forest of stone tablets inscribed with spiritual texts by famous poets, a library, a life-release pond, and a lecture hall with murals painted by renowned artists. He asked if Julian didn't think it would be sublimely elegant. Julian, feigning interest, suggested that towers and tablets were fine for quiet contemplation, but it wasn't very engaging for the general public. He proposed that his father should instead build more pavilions, covered walkways, and large halls suitable for hosting community fairs and markets. Imagine, he painted the picture, stalls selling crafts, food, books, and art. It would draw huge crowds, and everyone visiting the temple and attending the fairs would know it was funded by Arthur Sterling's generosity. The foundation could distribute charity from there. It would be far more practical. Arthur's eyes lit up. He declared it a brilliant idea and immediately rushed off, calling for his consultants to begin redesigning the project. Julian's mother, Eleanor, long accustomed to her husband's childlike enthusiasms, paid him no mind. She told Julian not to feel obligated to come home every day, as she knew how busy he was. She mentioned that Connor's new wife, Ashley, had been coming over and was a great help. As for his younger siblings, they were busy with their studies. She then leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper, and advised him to focus on his loyalty to his work. Julian smiled, saying he had 2 weeks off and wanted to spend time with his parents. Once his new post started, they would hardly see him. Eleanor demurred, explaining she was incredibly busy with a new business venture with Helena. They had discovered that a particular Italian silk brocade was selling for astronomical prices overseas. With their new textile mill, they could produce it in vast quantities and were currently buying up all available stock to control the market. She said that with his sisters grown and Ashley helping out, she was free to focus on her work. Julian commented that his mother was an excellent judge of character, so if she said Ashley was a good person, then it must be true. Eleanor sighed, confirming that Ashley was indeed a fine woman. She had been honest with Eleanor, admitting she had visited her cousin Kyla, who had been disowned and sent away after being implicated in a criminal conspiracy. Ashley had asked for Eleanor's forgiveness for maintaining the contact. Eleanor said it wasn't her place to forgive. The matter had been handled by federal authorities. She had heard Kyla had suffered a great deal in the first few years, but now that Julian was in a position of power, the family holding her had eased their restrictions. Ashley had brought Kyla supplies, but Kyla had only wept, begging for a divorce so she could come home, even if it meant living in seclusion on a remote family property. Julian asked if his mother had softened and agreed. Eleanor shook her head. Kyla had her own brothers to advocate for her. It wasn't her place as an aunt from a different branch of the family to intervene. She saw that Ashley was testing the waters, but when Eleanor didn't respond, the intelligent young woman dropped the subject. She knew Ashley understood the gravity of the situation. Kyla was involved in a capital crime dealt with directly by the highest levels of government. Bringing her back was impossible. Eleanor suspected Ashley hadn't told Connor the full story, or perhaps Connor was pretending not to know. A flicker of old resentment surfaced in her voice as she remarked that after being deceived for 20 years by that side of the family, feigning ignorance would come easily to him. Julian, aware of the deep chasm between the two branches of the family, simply offered a comforting smile. He assured her that once his sisters were married and his brother settled, she would have all the time in the world to build her business empire with Helena. Seeing through his flattery, she shooed him away, telling him to get back to his own important work. As Julian left his mother's study, he ran into Connor in the courtyard. His brother looked weathered, with a new beard that made him appear older and more serious. He was watching his wife, Ashley, settle their daughter into the car. He greeted Julian formally. Julian returned the gesture, asking why they were leaving so soon. Connor explained that the child was small and needed her afternoon nap. With their uncle preoccupied with his garden project, they wouldn't stay to bother him. Julian expressed his regrets for the short visit. As he was about to leave, Connor stopped him. He said he knew Julian was involved with the National Security Council and was incredibly busy, but he needed to warn him about something. Rumors could be dangerous, he cautioned. He brought up the case of Zane, the brilliant young policy advisor at the Department of Education who had been publicly demoted for advocating for radical educational reforms. A few nights ago, Zane had been violently abducted from his home. The kidnappers had used explosives to breach the compound wall and had taken him in front of his family. It was a shocking crime, and despite a massive search by the FBI and local police, not a single trace had been found after 2 days. Julian asked what that had to do with him. Connor looked at his younger brother, dressed in a deep violet cashmere coat that made his fair skin look almost translucent under the afternoon sun. He carried himself with an effortless authority that was still startling. He explained that just before his disappearance, Zane was reportedly organizing a coalition to formally condemn Julian's new educational initiatives as a threat to the nation's core values. The fact that the kidnappers used explosives, and that Julian oversaw the nation's advanced munitions development, had led some to whisper that Julian had him silenced. Seeing the unconcerned look on Julian's face, Connor felt a sense of relief. He knew his brother, for all his new power, was not a man of intrigue. It confirmed his belief that Julian was uninvolved. He simply advised him to be careful. Public opinion was a powerful force, and he needed to find a way to quell the rumors. Julian thanked him for the brothers parted ways, and as Julian watched Connor's car disappear down the long drive, a cold smile touched his lips. Zane, he thought, when he returned to D.C., he would settle that score. His security detail, seeing his expression, exchanged worried glances. One of them, a man named Caspian, suggested that perhaps the president should be informed. Julian scoffed, saying the president was busy and shouldn't be bothered with such trivial matters. These people were insignificant. He mused that by the time he got around to dealing with them, news of the Zane family's assets being seized would have already broken, which would surely frighten them into silence. Zane's uncle, Robert, along with his 2 sons, had spent 2 days hounding the D.C. police chief. Finally, they sought help from Councilman Crest, a man with deep connections. Crest personally visited Police Chief Evans, a man known more for his ability to smooth over conflicts than to solve them. Evans expressed his deep concern but lamented the complete lack of leads. Crest, frustrated by the man's placid incompetence, warned him that a federal official being abducted with military-grade explosives was a major scandal. If the case wasn't solved soon, the press and oversight committees would have a field day, and Evans's career would be over. Evans simply shrugged, saying if the press wanted to condemn him, he could only accept his fate. Defeated, Crest mentioned that Zane's family had provided a sketch of one of the abductors. Evans promised to look into it as soon as possible. Outside, Crest told Robert that the police were useless. He suggested that if Julian was behind it, Zane was likely already dead. Without concrete evidence, no one could touch a man so close to the president. Crest then offered another path, Marcus Vance. Vance, now heading the Chaucer University project, was a known rival of Julian's. He had once tried to court Helena, but her brother, a prominent general, had physically assaulted him, creating a deep-seated enmity between their families. Vance and Julian might appear cordial, Crest reasoned, but they were ideological opponents. The accusation of kidnapping and assassinating a political rival was so explosive that Vance would surely use it to attack Julian. Even the president couldn't protect him from that. Robert thanked him and, after Crest left, told his sons their new plan. Even if Zane returned, humiliated and broken, the family's honor would compel him to stay silent. They would proceed with the story that Julian had him killed, and they would disseminate Zane's anti-Julian manifesto widely, fulfilling their objective. With his mind made up, Robert headed for the Department of Education to find Marcus Vance. Unaware of the plot against him, Julian decided to pay a visit to Franklin Sterling, a retired statesman and old family friend who now served as an informal advisor. He had some things he needed to discuss in private. He had his aide pack a selection of rare European wines that Helena had brought back and rode his motorcycle to Franklin's Georgetown estate. Franklin was in the garden watching his grandson play when Julian arrived. He greeted him warmly but immediately got to the point, asking about the trouble Julian had stirred up since returning to D.C. He had heard about the Zane affair, which his sources said was under control, but he was more concerned about the matter of Vincent Axis alignment. The fact that Julian was the last person to see him alive was already the talk of the town. Julian explained the situation with Vincent. The man was dying, with no one to trust, and worried his young son would be unable to manage the family's complex finances. Given their shared history, Julian felt he couldn't refuse the man's dying wish. Franklin listened intently, and it dawned on him why the president had so quickly and publicly taken Vincent's son under his protection. Vincent, in his final desperate act, had inadvertently made the most politically astute move of his life. But Franklin looked at Julian with a sigh, wondering if the young man truly understood the depth of the president's strategy. He pointed out that Elias had not only taken the boy in but had given him a new name, a symbolic adoption. Within hours, everyone of consequence in Washington knew. Julian was confused, asking what was wrong with the president showing compassion for an orphan child. Franklin, seeing Julian's genuine cluelessness, spelled it out for him. By accepting Vincent's final request, Julian had become the boy's guardian and mentor. Now, the president, who had no children of his own, had taken this same child into the White House. This child, with a powerful mentor like Julian, had instantly become a political pawn, a potential successor in the eyes of the establishment. The various political factions would now be watching Julian's every move, viewing him as a threat. The president, Franklin explained, had always been brilliant in his handling of succession politics. By showing favor to many but choosing none, he kept everyone ambitious and loyal. This sudden move was uncharacteristically reckless, created a boy-king scenario. The child was a vessel, and whoever controlled him held a powerful claim to future influence. If Elias had given the boy to the former First Lady's family, they could have used him to seize political control. The realization hit Julian with the force of a physical blow. Franklin, seeing the color drain from his face, softened his tone. He added that perhaps it was a temporary measure. If the president were to have a child of his own, the situation would resolve itself. For now, they could only trust in the president's judgment. But Julian's mind was racing. He remembered Elias once saying to him, "If I grow old and fail you." This child was Elias's contingency plan for him. He had thought it was an act of mercy for Vincent, a man Elias had never particularly liked. But now he saw the truth. The child was a weapon, a guarantee. Should anything happen to Elias, Julian, with his control of the military and vast financial resources, could use his position as the boy's guardian to stabilize or even control the government. Elias had silently handed him the keys to the kingdom. His head spinning, Julian barely managed to continue the conversation, asking Franklin for advice on how to handle the boy's inheritance. Franklin, seeing his distress, advised him to keep it simple and transparent. He suggested investing was risky. If the market turned, Julian could be accused of mismanagement. Instead, he proposed donating the charitable half to Marcus Vance's new university to build a library in Vincent's name, a public good that would honor his memory. The other half should be placed in long-term government bonds to be given to the boy on his 18th birthday. The accounting would be simple and unimpeachable. Julian agreed it was a sound plan. Franklin, seeing that Julian was too distracted to talk further, gently suggested he go and speak with Marcus Vance directly. Julian left, his mind a storm of confusion and awe. Riding through the city, the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat cut through his thoughts. He traced the aroma to a gourmet food truck where a chef was theatrically carving a massive, slow-roasted beef shank. The spice rub was intoxicating. He knew Elias, with his Spartan diet, would never have tasted anything like it. He ordered the best cut, telling his aide to have it kept warm and brought to the White House later. He then continued on his way to the Department of Education. As he pulled up to the impressive neoclassical building, he saw them. Robert Zane and his two nephews, huddled near the entrance, speaking to a clerk. A surge of cold fury washed over him. From his position on his motorcycle, he called out, his voice cutting through the noise of the street. "You there, old man? I hear you've been circulating a portrait of me, trying to get me arrested." Robert Zane spun around. The sight of Julian, clad in impeccable tailoring, looking down at him from his powerful machine, was a mirror of the nightmarish figure from the abduction sketch. He froze, speechless. His nephews cried out, "It's him, the rich boy." A crowd of officials and academics on the steps turned to look. The clerk at the door, horrified, hissed at them, "What are you shouting about? That's Marquis Sterling. Show some respect." Marquis Sterling? Robert's face went white. Julian drove his bike closer, his voice clear and sharp. I hear the Zane family drove their own rising star to the brink, and now you want to pin the blame on me?" His words echoed in the courtyard, and everyone stopped to listen. Robert began to tremble. Julian continued, his voice ringing with cold accusation. He accused the Zane family of trying to force their nephew into a dramatic public resignation, a career suicide, to make a political statement and gain notoriety for themselves. He declared that Zane, loyal to his president and refusing to participate in such a treacherous act, had been forced to flee for his life, gravely injured in an explosion his own family orchestrated. Now, Julian thundered, unable to find him. They were trying to frame him for murder. "Do you take me for a fool?" he demanded. He decried their shameless manipulation, their willingness to sacrifice their own kin and slander a benevolent leader for a footnote in the history books. He turned to the assembled crowd of scholars and officials. "This is the Department of Education. Let's take this inside and ask these learned gentlemen to be the judge." A roar went up from the crowd. Whispers of forcing a resignation and family honor flew through the air. The academics, many of whom relied on the stability of the current administration for their funding and positions, looked at Robert with open hostility. To coerce a public servant into such an act was an attack on the system itself. It set a terrible precedent. If this were allowed, anyone could be pressured by their family into becoming a political martyr. One young professor who had known Zane shouted, "Deceitful, heartless monsters. That young man worked so hard, and his own family would destroy him for fame." Another yelled that it was not just a family matter, it was treason. Robert's nephews panicked, stammering denials. Robert himself stumbled backward. He understood now. Julian had recognized Zane that night but had played a role, rescuing him. Zane was safe in Julian's hands. And if Zane was alive, he would have contacted his mother's side of the family by now. The Zanes were finished. He turned to run, but it was too late. Department security guards, summoned by the clerk, moved in, supported by Julian's own formidable security detail. They were quickly subdued and arrested. Marcus Vance emerged from the building, looking weary. He saw Julian, still mounted on his bike, a triumphant smile on his face. He sighed and instructed the guards to transfer the Zanes to federal custody. He then beckoned Julian inside. He told him the president had already instructed him to draft the official order clearing Zane's name and that it would be released in a day or two. He gently chided Julian for personally engaging in a public shouting match with such despicable people, saying it was beneath his station and only provided gossip for the tabloids. Julian dismounted, explaining that he hadn't sought them out. They had been right in his path. He couldn't just let it go. He expressed his outrage at the rumor that he had kidnapped Zane to silence him. He wanted to tear down their facade in front of everyone. He was confident Zane had already reached safety, traveling by a high-speed maglev train, far faster than any message the Zanes could send to their allies. Marcus laughed, shaking his head at Julian's audacity. He led him into a formal office and offered him tea. He asked why Julian had really come to see him, knowing it wasn't just to confront the Zanes. Julian explained his purpose. First, to coordinate a memorial for their mutual friend, Vincent. Second, he wished to donate a substantial portion of Vincent's estate to the new Chaucer University to fund a library and a garden in his name. The mention of Vincent brought a shadow of sadness to Marcus's face. He spoke of his regret at having lost touch with Vincent in recent years. He had visited him once after returning to D.C. and had been shocked by his frail appearance. He had urged Vincent to move past his family's disgrace, but Vincent, consumed by grief after his wife's death, had only worsened. Marcus lamented the loss of a brilliant mind, a man who could have contributed so much to the new educational landscape. He warmly accepted Julian's offer, agreeing it was a fitting tribute. He advised Julian to clear the donation with the president first, to establish a formal protocol for such gifts to avoid turning the university into a vanity project for wealthy donors. Julian chuckled, remarking that if that happened, at least their fundraising would be a roaring success. He teased that academics like Marcus were too principled to think like businessmen. Marcus smiled back, retorting that Julian, for all his years of education, seemed determined to disavow his intellectual roots. He then asked why the opposition to the new university was so focused on Julian when he and Zane were the ones leading the project. Marcus answered his own question. Because everyone knew Julian was the president's chosen one. No one else could have pushed through such radical maritime and economic policies against the unanimous opposition of the cabinet. Without the president's unwavering, blatant support, Julian would have been destroyed by his political enemies years ago. Marcus grew more serious, reflecting that few officials started their careers intending to be mediocre. Most, he said, entered public service with grand ambitions, only to have their spirits broken by endless partisan attacks. Julian raised an eyebrow, quoting a classical text about serving when the state is just and retreating when it is not. But, he argued, where could one truly retreat to in a world on fire? He said that if you're going to accept a government salary, you have a duty to act. If an official won't serve the people, he quipped, he might as well go home and sell potatoes. The raw, vibrant ambition radiating from Julian was infectious, and Marcus felt a spark of his own youthful zeal return. He admitted he had been about to offer Julian some cautionary advice, but now felt it was unnecessary. Julian guessed correctly that he had been about to bring up the matter of the president adopting Vincent's son. Marcus simply shook his head, saying it was a private matter for the president. He changed the subject, pulling out a folder filled with logistical problems facing the university's construction. But Julian was already thinking about the roasted beef getting cold. He promised to send over a competent project manager the next day to solve all of Marcus's problems and then promptly took his leave. In the private residence of the White House, Elias smelled the rich aroma of roasted meat as his car pulled up. It reminded him of the last time Julian had brought an unconventional meal into the palace, and he smiled. He had thought Julian would be staying at his family's estate for the night, but his return always filled the formal spaces with a welcome warmth and life. As he stepped out of the car, he saw Julian by a portable grilling station, pressing a piece of meat into a bowl of spices. His chief of staff, Silas, was nearby, remarking that this was a rare delicacy, something from the famed emperor's 8th menu of historical feasts. Elias asked what it was. Julian looked up, his eyes bright with amusement. Beef shank, he announced. He explained that he'd ordered it from a food truck, but then he'd run into the undead old creature from the Zane family, and the confrontation had delayed him. He recounted the incident with relish, how Robert had tried to flee like a coward and had been promptly arrested. Elias gently reprimanded him, saying that for a man of his stature, it was reckless to engage directly. He warned that desperate men could be dangerous. He reminded Julian that even a scholar like Zane had managed to create a diversion with explosives. Julian dismissed the concern, arguing that men who used others as pawns for their own glory were cowards at heart, too attached to their own miserable lives to risk them. He gleefully described how Robert's face had turned ghostly white when he realized Zane was safe and had allied with him. Afraid of a longer lecture, Julian quickly changed the subject back to the food. The delay had caused the meat to cool, and besides, the street vendor's spice blend was bland and potentially unsanitary for presidential consumption. So, he had simply bought the cooked shank and was now re-searing and seasoning it himself with his own superior spice mix. Elias examined the meat, noting the gelatinous, marbled texture of the slow-cooked cut. He questioned if something so rich was even edible. Julian compared it to roasted marrow, explaining that the fat was where the flavor was. He urged Elias to try just a bite, knowing his partner's conservative palate, and assured him there were other options prepared: venison, rabbit, and lamb. Elias watched as Julian, his fingers coated in fragrant spices, carefully prepared a piece and then washed his hands in a silver bowl. The simple, domestic act of Julian going to such lengths just to share a new taste with him filled Elias with a deep sense of contentment. He went inside to change out of his suit into a more comfortable linen shirt and trousers. When he returned, he asked why Julian hadn't stayed at his family's estate. Julian explained that both his parents were consumed by their work. His mother and Helena were cornering the market on Italian brocade, and his father was designing his spiritual retreat. His mother, he added with a laugh, had effectively kicked him out, telling him to go be more loyal to the nation. Elias remarked that the textile venture was a good thing. It would create jobs for local weavers. Julian nodded, then vented his frustration about the critics who accused them of destroying traditional livelihoods with their modern factories. He argued they were opening up global markets, which was the true path to national prosperity. Elias calmly agreed, telling him not to pay any mind to the ramblings of archaic thinkers. Julian placed a perfectly seared, fragrant piece of the beef into Elias's mouth. Elias chewed thoughtfully, then smiled. The flavor was excellent. He was touched that Julian, even while walking down the street, was thinking of him. Julian leaned closer, his eyes shining with a new idea. He suggested that since the autumn weather was so pleasant, they should go for a walk through the night market instead of spending the evening buried in paperwork. Seeing the hopeful, eager look in his eyes, Elias felt his heart stir. He agreed. After a light meal, they changed into unremarkable casual clothes and rode motorcycles out of a private rear gate of the White House grounds. They followed the Potomac for a while before heading into the bustling streets of Georgetown. Julian stopped at an ATM, pulling out a thick wad of cash and waving it in front of Elias. Without this, he declared, they wouldn't get far in the night market. Elias smiled, playing along with the charade, praising Julian's foresight, even though his security detail was shadowing them, pockets full of money. They parked the bikes and walked into a crowded alleyway filled with food stalls, the air thick with 100 competing, delicious smells. Though they had just eaten, Julian bought everything that looked interesting, and soon Elias found himself tasting exotic pickled fruits, candied pumpkin seeds, and strange herbal infusions while they watched street magicians and musicians perform. They wandered into a dimly lit antique shop. Julian bought a pair of antique cufflinks made of milky agate, each with a natural gold-red inclusion that looked remarkably like a soaring eagle. The shop owner, a shrewd salesman, showered them with compliments, saying the eagle was a symbol of peace and prosperity brought by a great leader. The flattery clearly pleased Elias, who held one of the cufflinks up to the light, examining the pattern. Julian paid without haggling. As Elias admired the cufflink, Julian handed him the other, asking him to engrave a personal motto on it for him someday. Elias countered that Julian should be the one to do the engraving, remarking that his artistic skills had improved immensely, especially his figure drawing. The comment, though delivered in a neutral tone, made Julian blush deeply. He looked away, a playful pout on his lips. The shop owner, seeing their easy intimacy and expensive clothes, sensed a major sale. He told them he had something truly special, something he only showed to true connoisseurs. Julian, feeling expansive, told him to bring it out, boasting that he had plenty of money. The owner disappeared into a back room and returned with a velvet-lined box containing a pair of exquisite hand-painted fans, each adorned with a tassel of intricately carved tourmaline peaches. "I call this pair the Peach Blossom Promise," the owner announced. Julian picked one up and unfurled it. He immediately snapped it shut, his ears turning bright red. He tossed it back in the box, declaring it unsuitable. The owner was baffled by his strong reaction. Fearing he had misjudged his customers, he quickly offered to show them some newly imported novelties from Europe instead. Julian, anxious to prevent Elias from seeing the fan, quickly agreed, heading for the stairs to the upper showroom. The owner boasted that his goods came directly from Marquis Sterling's own ships, a claim Julian inwardly scoffed at, knowing his distribution channels were tightly controlled. The upstairs room was filled with European goods: telescopes, clocks, intricate lace, and ivory carvings. Julian picked up a magnifying glass, remarking that it was indeed authentic. The owner proudly stated that these were in high demand among scholars and seamstresses, and that the domestic factories trying to replicate them hadn't yet succeeded. This was the real thing. Elias noticed Julian's expression darken slightly and, assuming he was annoyed at the slight against his own manufacturing efforts, reassured him that they would soon master the technique. The owner, oblivious, bragged that his inventory was so exclusive that even the White House probably didn't have access to such fine items. Now Julian's face was a thundercloud. He put the magnifying glass down and, feigning a casual air, told the owner that these were mere trinkets. He explained he was looking for a truly significant gift for his grandfather back home in Massachusetts. The owner, catching his accent, asked if he was in the pearl trade, as many prominent Massachusetts merchants were. Julian played along, lamenting that business was slow because of cheap glass bead imports. The owner, now convinced he was dealing with a fellow merchant, mentioned he had an imported European stained glass screen, though he hesitated, explaining that the artwork depicted classical nudes and winged cherubs, which might not be appropriate for a grandfather. Julian asked to see it. In the inner room were more expensive items, including a massive grandfather clock adorned with a painting of a reclining Venus. Julian studied it for a moment, then, to the owner's delight, announced he would buy it. The price was a staggering $100,000, but Julian produced a bank draft from his wallet without batting an eye. The owner, seeing the certified draft from a major bank, knew he had a whale on the line. He felt obligated to offer a polite that giving a clock as a gift to an elder was considered bad luck by some, as the word sounded like a funeral toll. Julian waved it off, saying the clock was for his own dining hall. He then mentioned what he was really looking for. He had heard that Marquis Sterling's latest shipment included a new type of weapon, a Maxim gun, capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute. He claimed he needed one for his shipping convoys, which were often targeted by pirates, and said his grandfather would be thrilled with such a powerful and prestigious item. The owner's face fell. He admitted that would be difficult. Julian sighed dramatically, saying he knew it was a controlled item. He had already offered $500,000 on the black market with no luck. As he turned to leave, the owner stopped him. He whispered that for a slightly higher price, and with some time he might be able to help. It would require a non-refundable $10,000 deposit to open the right doors. He stressed the immense risk involved. It was a capital offense. Julian feigned surprise. "You really have a way?" The owner said he was maybe 40 or 50% sure he could do it. Julian, with the air of a reckless gambler, immediately agreed. "You have to risk it to get the biscuit," he declared, pulling another bank draft from his wallet. "Even if the deal falls through, we can still be friends." The owner, beaming, asked for his name. "Vance," Julian said smoothly, borrowing Marcus's surname. The owner's last doubts vanished. The Vance family was a well-known, powerful New England clan. They arranged for the owner to send word to a property Julian's family owned on a specific side street once he had news, and to deliver the clock there the next day as a preliminary step. As they left the shop and stepped back into the throng of the crowded street, Julian was practically vibrating with fury, his face flushed and his eyes blazing. Elias, sensing the storm, took his arm and guided him toward a quieter street. "Your bookstore isn't far from here," he said calmly. "Let's go sit for a while." Inside the private third-floor study of his bookstore, Julian finally erupted. He told Elias that the goods in that shop weren't just smuggled. They were from the very latest shipment Helena had brought in. Someone had the audacity to steal directly from his supply chain and sell the goods just a few miles from the White House. Even military-grade weapons. He swore he would find the traitors and make them pay for their insolence. Elias poured him a cup of tea, his voice a soothing balm. "In any great enterprise, there will always be dead branches on the tree," he said. "It's good that we found this now." He reminded Julian of what Zane had tried to tell him, that there was smuggling within the military transport divisions. At the time, Julian had dismissed it as slander. Now he saw the truth. The corruption was deeper than he had imagined. Elias handed him a candied apricot from a small dish on the table, telling him that human greed was an endless, unkillable thing. The only solution was stricter control. Julian bit into the apricot, the sharp sweetness a small comfort. He looked at Elias with admiration, thinking of the immense pressures he must face daily, running an entire country. He remarked that he had heard people describe Elias as intolerant and severe, yet in all the years he had known him, he had seen only patience and a willingness to give second chances to all but the most corrupt. Elias explained that the political class was used to a different kind of leader, one who played a game of checks and balances, who ruled in partnership with the elite and turned a blind eye to their indiscretions. That was their definition of a benevolent ruler. He, on the other hand, did not play that game. He held them accountable. He stripped them of their titles and fortunes and put them to work repaying their debt to society. He didn't make them martyrs by executing them. He made them live with their disgrace. That, he said with a wry smile, is why they considered him cruel. He praised Julian for his handling of the Zane affair, calling him his lucky star. The compliment dispelled the last of Julian's anger. He watched Elias, who looked serene and composed, the warm light of the study catching the planes of his face. His heart skipped a beat. "Elias," he said softly, "it's getting late. Let's go back to the White House." Elias, pleased that he had managed to soothe Julian's temper, was amused by the sudden shift in his mood. One moment he was a storm of righteous fury. The next his eyes were full of undisguised longing. Elias found this transparent, unfiltered affection both endearing and, if he was honest, a source of pride. He suggested they browse the bookstore for a bit first, to let the last of the day's tension dissipate. Downstairs, Elias picked out a few books for Julian to read, and they wandered through the art gallery section. Elias paused before a landscape painting, remarking with a smile that he didn't know Marcus Vance's work was for sale here. Julian expressed his admiration that Elias could recognize it even though it was signed with a pseudonym. They reminisced about their shared art lessons years ago, and Julian happily reminded Elias of the painting of a cat he had given him as a coming-of-age gift. Elias, embarrassed by the memory of his amateurish work, offered to paint him a new one in exchange for the old one. Julian refused, saying he cherished it. He confessed that he had his seamstresses embroider the cat onto a small sachet, which he kept under his pillow. At night, when he missed Elias, he would hold it, imagining he could smell his scent. The confession, so earnest and unashamed, made Elias smile. As they continued their walk upstairs, past the tea rooms where students were studying, Elias spotted a small, charming soapstone carving of a cat on a display counter. The stone was translucent and milky, with fluffy white inclusions that looked like a cat's soft fur. Recalling their conversation, he picked it up, the cool stone smooth against his fingertips. Julian watched his long, elegant fingers caress the stone animal, a warmth spreading through him. "If you like it, you should take it," he murmured. Suddenly, a loud voice from the adjacent study room broke the quiet moment. A student was pontificating about the Zane affair, condemning Zane as a coward who had sold out to the powerful Marquis Sterling instead of following his family's noble instruction to commit political suicide. Another voice cautioned that this was only the Marquis' side of the story. But the first speaker was adamant, claiming Zane had betrayed the intellectual class. A third voice chimed in, more cynical. He suggested that the entire affair was a setup by the administration. Marquis Sterling, he theorized, was just a convenient frontman, a wealthy scion used to implement the president's radical economic reforms. If the policies succeeded, the president would take the CR. If they failed, Sterling would be sacrificed as a scapegoat, his vast fortune seized to refill the national coffers. They spoke of the rampant corruption in the military shipping divisions, all under Sterling's command, and how it was only a matter of time before he was brought down. Elias's face hardened. Julian saw the change and was about to order the students thrown out, but Elias caught his wrist, his eyes calm, and shook his head. He silently led Julian away. Once they were outside, Julian quickly reassured him. "Don't be angry, Elias. They're just ignorant students who know nothing of your character or our relationship." Elias looked at him, his expression unreadable, and asked if he often heard such talk. Julian admitted that he did. Ever since he had started his work for the administration, the slander had been constant. He had people in his tea rooms transcribe the gossip, and he had read it all. He took Elias's hand, his voice low and firm. He reminded Elias that he had been warned this would happen. To do great things and to be Elias's partner meant he would be a target. He didn't care what they said. He would simply continue his work with integrity, and his achievements would be his only defense. Elias looked at him for a long moment. "My Julian," he said softly, "your heart is true." Julian smiled, a secret, intimate smile. "Who said I'm not greedy? It's just that I already have the most precious thing in the world. What else is there to desire?" Later that night, back in their private quarters, Julian found Elias reclining against the pillows on their bed, examining something in the candlelight. It was the pair of fans from the antique shop. Julian's face grew hot. "Elias, you didn't." Elias had sent someone back to buy them. He held them up, explaining that he'd been intrigued by the craftsmanship of the carved peach tassels. He showed Julian how the two halves of the peach on the tassels fit together perfectly, a symbol of a shared peach, an ancient allusion to a famous story of same-sex lovers. If the tassels were so symbolic, he mused, the paintings must be as well. He slowly unfurled one fan. It depicted two beautiful young men in a lush peach grove, their silk robes half open, their expressions tender and intimate. The artistry was exquisite, sensual but not vulgar. Elias turned the fan over to reveal a line of poetry inscribed on the back. "We pledge with this painting, an oath for all time, that we shall never forget one another." Julian then asked to see the other fan. Elias handed it to him, still closed. Julian opened it eagerly, and his breath caught in his throat. The second fan was a stark contrast. It depicted a desolate winter scene, with heavy snow blanketing two adjacent burial mounds. All the vibrant life of the first fan was gone, replaced by the cold silence of death. Julian's eyes widened. He turned the fan over. On the back were two simple words, "Whitehead." It was the end of the phrase to grow old together until our hair is white. The artist had depicted not the decay of love, but its ultimate fulfillment, a bond lasting until death and beyond. A lump formed in Julian's throat, and his eyes burned. Elias saw his emotional reaction and gently took the fan, closing it. "I wish only to see our joy," he whispered, "not our parting." He took Julian's hand and told him it was time to rest. Julian leaned into his embrace, his voice thick with emotion as he agreed. A moment later, however, he turned and captured Elias's lips in a fierce, possessive kiss. "Life is too short," he murmured against his skin, his voice still choked with feeling. "We have been apart for so long. From now on, we must not waste a single moment." The next morning, Julian was gone before sunrise, setting his own private investigation into the smuggling ring in motion. After his morning security briefing, Elias found Silas waiting for him with a box. Inside were transcripts of all the slanderous conversations about Julian that had been recorded at the bookstore. As he read them, his expression grew colder. He asked Silas who was in charge of the bookstore now. Silas explained the chain of command, and Elias noted that Julian had become so consumed with public service that he was neglecting his own businesses. He then asked for the identity of the student who had been so vocal the previous night. Silas had the information ready. His name was Dennis Reagan, a bitter, middle-aged academic who had repeatedly failed to secure a university position. He blamed his failures on a system that favored the young and well-connected. Elias gave a cold smile. He ordered Silas to contact the dean of the charity-funded academy where Reagan taught, the very academy founded by Vincent and supported by Julian's donations, and have him fired for unprofessional conduct and academic incompetence. He then instructed Silas to contact the State Academic Review Board and have them issue a formal reprimand to Reagan, him that his teaching credentials would be revoked if he continued his unprofessional public commentary. That evening, Dennis Reagan came home to an empty house. His wife had left, tired of his drinking and abuse. Soon after, some of his academic peers arrived with cheap wine and meat, ostensibly to console him about his sudden dismissal and official reprimand. But he saw the truth in their eyes. They were there to gloat and to push him toward a desperate act. They began to praise the idea of principled protest, urging him to become a martyr, to die for their cause and bring down the Marquis Sterling. It would be a chance, they said, for him to achieve the historical fame that had always eluded him. A cold dread washed over Reagan. He looked at their eager, predatory faces and suddenly saw his own life as nothing more than a stepping stone for their ambitions. In a blind rage, he overturned the table, screaming at them to get out, accusing them of trying to profit from his death. After they left, scattered and muttering insults, Reagan stood alone in the wreckage. A terrifying thought struck him. If he died that night mysteriously, they would have their martyr. He grabbed his coat and fled into the night, running to his wife's family, choosing the certainty of their scorn and abuse over the possibility of a staged, heroic death. Meanwhile, Julian met with Sean and Helena. They had compared their shipping manifests and confirmed the discrepancies. Sean, shamefaced, admitted his mistake. Because Helena's brother was a high-ranking general, he had assumed the missing goods, mostly non-military supplies, were being unofficially requisitioned as a perk of rank, a common practice in his past dealings with government officials. He hadn't wanted to create an awkward situation by questioning it. Helena, in turn, said she had assumed the discrepancies were on Julian's end, perhaps for his own discretionary use, and had not looked too closely. This mutual, unspoken deference had created the perfect cover for the thieves. They then learned that the one Maxim gun that had supposedly been destroyed in a fire at the R&D facility had vanished from the inventory at the same time the black market offer appeared. The pieces clicked into place. The thieves had been emboldened by their initial success with small items and, tempted by Julian's massive offer, had staged an accident to steal the weapon itself. Julian declared that the entire smuggling operation had to be rooted out and the transport divisions purged. Just then, an aide arrived with a message. The antique dealer had been in touch. The exchange was set for that night. The terms were cash only, to be verified before the merchandise was revealed. Julian gave Sean a cold smile. The criminals were in a hurry, afraid of holding onto the hot merchandise for too long. Sean insisted on leading the sting himself, but Julian refused. He had his own plan. He sent a message to the White House. "The fish is on the hook. I'm going tonight." His chief bodyguard, Caspian, begged him to let a double go in his place, knowing the president would be furious. But Julian was adamant. The dealer had met him personally, and a substitute would spook them. Caspian reluctantly relayed the message. At the White House, Elias received the news while in a meeting with his cabinet. He calmly dismissed them, then turned to Caspian. He was visibly displeased. Why must he go himself? He demanded. An explosive is indiscriminate. If they are cornered, he could be killed. Caspian repeated Julian's reasoning. Elias knew Julian's stubbornness. To forbid him would only strain their relationship. He thought for a moment, then told Caspian to assemble a team. "I have an idea," he said. That evening, as Julian, dressed as the flamboyant Mr. Vance, prepared to leave with several armored cars loaded with $500,000 in silver bullion, his cousin Simon confronted him, begging him not to go. He couldn't believe the president would allow such a risk. Just then, an elegant, unmarked town car pulled up. The door opened, and Julian stepped forward to get in. He stopped short. Inside, dressed in a simple but elegant suit, sat Elias. Elias explained calmly that since they had met the dealer together, it was only logical they should complete the transaction together to avoid suspicion. Julian began to protest vehemently, arguing that the President of the United States could not possibly walk into a trap set for arms smugglers. Elias simply looked at him, his gaze steady and unwavering. Under that silent pressure, Julian's arguments faltered. Elias then summoned two men. They were the spitting image of Julian and himself, dressed in identical clothes, their faces subtly altered with makeup, their posture and mannerisms perfectly mimicked. They were body doubles, trained for years for just such a contingency. Elias laid out the new plan. He and Julian would go to the antique shop to verify the money. Once the dealer was satisfied, he would direct them to the final exchange point. At that moment, they would switch places with the doubles, who would proceed to the rendezvous while a tactical team moved into position. The plan went off without a hitch. At the shop, the dealer, reassured by their presence and the sight of the silver, told them the exchange would happen at a private pier on the industrial canal. As their convoy left the shop, it took a turn down a dark side street. In a matter of seconds, two figures slipped out of the lead car and two others slipped in. The convoy continued on toward the canal, while another car, appearing from the shadows, sped away in the opposite direction, carrying Julian and Elias back to the safety of the White House. As they drove through the quiet city streets, Elias finally broke the silence. He remarked that it was not military corruption that was the true danger. It was the irresistible temptation of Julian's $500,000. That massive, glittering prize had made them reckless. It had made them believe any risk was worth taking.